Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio, the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Ebony Adams, and I'm filling in for Anita Sarkeesian, our class valedictorian. I'm joined, as always, by AV Club President Carolyn Pettit.
Hello.
How you doing, Carol? Yeah. In today's show, we're going to be discussing the new teen film, Booksmart. Carol, how you been? What's up?
I've been surviving E3, which is the annual, video game, the Entertainment Electronic Expo held in Los Angeles every year. And each year for the past 5 years, Feminist Frequency has done like a statistical analysis of the games that are presented at E3 by the big companies and publishers that hold press conferences there. And we do our little statistical analysis based on, gender representation, how many games focus on a specific male hero, a specific female hero, maybe give you a choice of characters and so on. And it's just a lot of data to go through. And this year we actually teamed with Wired to present our data to the public, and along with our sort of conclusions or our analysis of what the data tells us. So of course we'll link to that in the show notes. But E3 is, as somebody who simultaneously really loves games, but is also very wary of them in a lot of ways. E3 is always this complicated time, right? It's very exciting in a lot of ways. There's announcements or reveals or trailers that maybe in some ways look really, really impressive, really exciting, games that that I can't wait to play. But it's always tempered with, at least typically tempered with no shortage of kind of garbage in terms of what even those games that I'm excited about might say politically on some level, or if not those games, then certainly other games. So anyway, so it's just been a bit of a roller coaster ride this past week, but you
came through it. You came through it alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who is situated pretty firmly on the back of the beyond of the unincorporated territory of the outskirts of gaming.
Yeah.
Hearing, or rather reading, folks' responses to the news coming out of E3 has been fascinating. Obviously, we all had a great time when Keanu made his appearance, right?
We sure did.
Yeah. But then today was reading on Twitter, and I can't remember if it's you that posted this in Slack, or if I just happened to stumble upon it in Twitter, but a sort of response about one of the games. I think Cyberpunk, and that's the one that Keanu is in, right? About the reason why these female characters were nude in the game. And it was it is the most monkey ass explanation. I was like, it's stunning in how terrible it is.
Exactly. And I mean, this is a developer, CD Projekt Red, that has a history from their previous big games. So let's just call this is all. We're already in the midst of the entertainment news. We didn't give it like an official start, but we are in it already. So here we are. This is the entertainment news. CD Projekt Red. They're responsible for the Witcher series, which particularly by the third and final entry, had peaked into being just like a kind of considered like a world-class action role-playing game, or not even just a role-playing game. But throughout that game and that series, there are very serious issues with the exploitation of women's bodies. Like it's there's at least one very memorable scene, if not more, in The Witcher 3, where as the main character Geralt, you're sort of investigating maybe like a series of murders, and the crime scene that you investigate at one point is just like, sexualized naked women's bodies, dead women's bodies, like just all over the place. And it's the sort of thing that CD Projekt Red folks, I'm sure, would sort of claim or defend is meant to show the brutality. They believe on. I mean, I think that they honestly believe on some level that they are creating like mature, thoughtful stuff when they do things like this. Like I don't think that it's malice or like maybe I'm being too generous here, or like deliberate attempts here to like be exploitative or harmful. I honestly think that some of the people making these creative decisions just don't get it. They just don't get how how framing women's bodies in the ways that they do actually, contributes to a culture in which, whatever kind of violence against women they may think that they're commenting on or what have you is actually kind of normalized and sensationalized.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, as someone who, spoiler alert, loves crime drama, the ways in which female bodies in particular, and, let's leave out, although you can never leave out the subject of race, but female bodies in particular are both invested with so much metaphorical meaning, right? Like they're supposed to carry so much meaning in these kinds of texts. They're supposed to demonstrate, as you say, like, the brutality, the inherent violence of a world, the hopelessness, that whatever. It's supposed to carry all these meanings. And the nude male body is assumed to either not be able to carry those sorts of meanings or to carry too much meaning, right? And this is not to say that the answer to showing a brutalized nude female body is to show an equal number of brutalized naked male bodies. That's not what I'm saying. But it's so interesting to me the ways in which, sort of across media, women's bodies are symbols because it is they are meant to be. They are always already symbolic in a way that male bodies are not, And so there's sort of like, idea currency that we all know what it means when you see a broken woman's body.
Right.
And there's almost this sense that, like, come on, what we're going for here, right? You say, like, this is a mature text. This is something that's really going to make you stop and think or stop the breath. It's shorthand in a way, and we really don't unpack that enough.
And like a lot of the conversation around cyberpunk is also around representations, potential representations of trans people and imagery around trans people, because so in a demo, a gameplay demo, or like screenshots were released from a demo that was shown at E3 that include an ad, like an ad in the game world of Cyberpunk, where what you have is an individual, I would say female coded, right? A female coded individual. It's an ad for like a soft drink. Or some sort of beverage called Chromanticore, and the tagline is like, "Mix it up, 16 flavors you'd love to mix." And the individual's body, like the model in the ad, like they very clearly have a penis sort of protruding in their clothing, and the thing is that, I mean, the Polygon did a sort of interview. I felt it was kind of softball interview with about this ad and with the artist responsible. And again, like, this is a case where, like, I honestly believe, reading the comments that the artist makes about her artwork, that she believes that she is kind of lending commentary or sort of trying to do something that's going to comment on how trans people are depicted in this world. But the reality is, and those of us who have lived and played games in these spaces and just existed in these cultural spaces for a long, long time now, know that, like, all that an image like this is likely to do is, in fact, sort of encourage those people who are already inclined to, like, dehumanize and objectify trans people to sort of feel like the world is reflecting their own, is sort of in a way justifying or sort of codifying their worldview about trans people, like saying, yes, this person is, in other words, saying, yes, this person is a kind of a dehumanized object, rather than being, hey, player, we want you to think really seriously about your bias. It just doesn't work that way. And in fact, like, a game like Cyberpunk 2077 probably is very much in a place to get players who carry those biases into the game world to think about them, and and I would love nothing more than for the game to actually make those players uncomfortable, to present trans people as like in fully human, complex, three-dimensional ways where you have to interact with them, and the story of the game world just inherently acknowledges their full humanity or does something that really would make any player who comes to that game not expecting or anticipating that experience, that it would push back against their biases and make them uncomfortable. But an ad like this in the game world is simply not going to do that. Now, obviously the game's not out yet. It doesn't come out until April of next year. We're only talking right now about what has actually been made available to us and what's been revealed to us. I'm not passing judgment on the final game, but I am saying that a lot of this is not encouraging about where the final game is headed and who it's for and whose worldview it may sort of be rubber stamping in terms of like, I believe everything I've seen so far leads me to think that the average straight white male player who maybe finds trans people kind of icky or uncomfortable or what have you is probably not going to find themselves in any way challenged or provoked ideologically by this game. So, So, this
is fascinating. I want to come back to this in the bonus segment because there's a whole bunch that I want to follow up with you and hear more from you about. And I also want to bring up notions of disability as a regard to the presentation of Cyberpunk, because many disabled folks, especially disabled gamers, are like, do you realize what it means when you present the sort of augmented human body, which is a way that many disabled people, with sort of like mechanized, modifications to their bodies, think of the ways that their bodies operate, right? What does it mean when you present the sort of augmented human body as something different than human? Yeah. Not just like beyond human, but something different than human. And also something to be frightened of, Like this is a trope that no longer should be allowed to stand by. So let's come back to that. Do you have any more quick entertainment news? Before we jump into the main?
Real quick, I feel like, because what I'm about to mention, as briefly and in passing as I'm about to mention, is clearly the biggest entertainment news story of the past, month at least. So I'm sorry that we're not devoting way more time to this, but I feel like, we have to at least give it a mention. And that is that the audiobook for Find Me, Andre Aciman's upcoming sequel to Call Me By Your Name, is being read by none other than Michael Stuhlbarg, who played Elio's father in Call Me By Your Name. And in fact, apparently the character of Elio's father. He has a name, and I've read the book and everything. Mr. Perlman, we could call him Mr. Perlman. It actually apparently figures somewhat significantly in Find Me, the novel. So anyway, it's just nice.
We should spend more time on that. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. But that was one of the things that I did love about the movie is that character and that actor's
so good
portrayal of that character. And I wanted more. So you know what? I'm going to pick up the book, or maybe I'll just pick up the audiobook and allow him to read to me, because that would be amazing. Right on. All right, let's take a quick break before we get into Booksmart. Yeah. Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners, we would love for you to join our Patreon community over at www.patreon.com/femfreak. Do it today. All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a tour on the nostalgia bus by revisiting the highs and lows of young adulthood, courtesy of the new film Booksmart, which was helmed by first-time director Olivia Wilde. The film follows two high school overachievers, Amy and Molly, as they attempt to make up for a lifetime of playing it safe by finding and enjoying one wild party on the night before graduation. I really liked this movie.
Yeah. Me too.
I really liked it. I know that there's been quite a bit of conversation. In fact, almost more conversation about the ways that this movie is underperforming, that's in quotation marks, right?
Yeah.
And the reasons why it might be underperforming than about the actual film itself and the sorts of things that it does. And so I want to make sure that we don't replicate that conversation, but
Sure.
I do find it completely unsurprising that a film that centers two lovely, they're absolutely lovely young women, but two young women who don't sort of participate in a kind of like really traditional, like, sexualized young adult fantasy, why a film like that perhaps wouldn't get the marketing push that more traditional teen fare might have gotten. Although I have to say, because I'm an old woman, I'm 87.
Yeah, we know.
It's right? I bring it up every week. I no longer watch a lot of films in this genre.
Sure.
And so I'm completely kind of unaware of what's been happening.
Yeah. Right. I also wonder, like, viewing it like I want to believe that this film is, under quote unquote underperforming at the box office, so it might be. Like, I'd love to believe that it's destined to become a kind of classic of sorts, maybe among people who are the age of its main characters right now. But I don't know if it is a film like I'm curious whether the film is resonating with young people or resonating more with people my age who may in some way see the experiences of ourselves as young people or whatever, like, reflected in it in one way or another. But I before we even get into that, one thing I want to say that to me is sort of just paramount to what made this movie such a pleasure to watch and just to kind of be swept up in is the two leads are, the characters' names are Amy and Molly, played by Caitlin Dever. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but I believe it's Caitlin Dever, and Beanie Feldstein. And so Beanie Feldstein as Molly, and I have to say, so Beanie Feldstein is I think she is a very attractive, young woman. Like, I think she's kind of radiant. I think that there's just a really attractive quality about her as a screen presence and as an actor and as a person. And I really appreciated that, her body type is not really necessarily what is generally considered the norm, or, to fall under the umbrella of maybe conventionally attractive women. But one thing that I really loved about this film is that, both in terms of the script and I think the characters in the world, but also in terms of just the camera work, the lighting, the framing, everything about this film sort of was just on board with the idea that Molly is attractive.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's
no, I absolutely do know what you mean, and I felt the same way. So Beanie Feldstein, like you say, is an absolutely just lovely and adorable young woman, right? She is also plus sized.
Right.
The film never makes that an issue. And the other characters never make that an issue. And, as someone who is plus size myself, I am hyper aware of the ways in which folks get framed, fellow fat people get framed in media criticism, and how we're spoken of in narratives. And so there was an opportunity in this film, which thankfully the film does not take, wherein Molly's classmates talk about how attractive she is. And it's a gross scene that they're objectifying her in that moment. But they talk about how attractive she is, and they are utterly serious about it. It's not
right.
The fact that they find her attractive is not played for laughs. And in fact, they subvert what you would expect their criticisms to be. They don't say she's a butter face. They say she's a butter personality, right? Of course she's attractive. Of course she's hot. Of course I would do her.
Exactly.
But the problem is her personality, her high-strung, high-maintenance, overachieving ass.
Yes.
It's not the fact that, she doesn't look like, an extra from a CW show. I absolutely loved that. I loved it.
Yeah, and, it was just, going into this film, I I didn't quite know what to expect. It wound up being more of like, it wound up having more of a kind of, I don't want to, dream logic isn't really what I'm looking for, but it wasn't like as, okay, so I went to a public school in the Los Angeles, area, and I taught at a public school in the Los Angeles area. And
you deserve hazard pay.
Thank you. And, but like, okay, so what you have in the situation in this film is that you have the central overachievers who are both going to, Molly's going to like an Ivy League school. Amy is like taking a year off to like go to Africa and make tampons or something. But like, basically what you find out very early on in the film is that like all these sort of the classmates that Amy and Molly had written off as like, oh, they're just partying all the time and they're not like serious about their futures, are also going to like really great schools. And as like as somebody who again like lived that. So the school that they go to, I think it's a fictional school, but it's set in the San Fernando Valley, or it's set in like the Los Angeles area. I have my feelings about all that are complicated because the reality is, of course, that like the only way that you're gonna have like a bunch of kids like who consistently like one after the other are going to like really sort of prestigious, highly regarded, expensive schools is if those students are rich. And like, like the percentage of students from the schools that I attended and taught at who didn't go on to college, or went to, community college or what have you, was like very, very high. And the percentage of, any students going to, like Ivy Leagues, like it's basically, I don't know if there were any in my graduating class, to be honest, at my high school. Like, I don't know. It was just this sort of weird, I feel like there's a kind of, as much as I was like on board with what the film is doing, on one hand, I'm also like, okay, but this is like erasing real issues of like that to whatever extent a situation like this would exist, it would be very much tied up in matters of class and wealth and things like that. Yeah. And the film, like, obviously there's money in the film. There's characters who have more money than others, but it's not ever explored as maybe a factor in really shaping the trajectory of the lives of these young people.
Yeah, so I loved how the film does not allow Molly to write off her classmates for reasons, of like they are young and they are enjoying being young. So they're cute kids and, they have sex and they do drugs and they play sports and they goof off and whatever. And the film does not demonize them for it. And, takes Molly to task for doing so. And of course that instigates, this whole sort of like, come to Jesus moment where she's like, what the fuck? Like everything I did because I thought, I needed it to get into a good school so that it would launch me into the right career and whatever. And apparently that wasn't necessary, right? So I love that. But like you, one of the few areas where I felt like this film sort of flattened experiences in a way that didn't work for me was the ways in which it didn't address how, like, it matters that, for instance, Molly, we see her coming out of her home, which is an apartment.
Yes.
Versus Amy coming out of her home, which is this very cute, fairly modest, but still very nice suburban home. And I'm like, listen, it matters when a kid from a working class or poor background, they don't have the luxury of not working as hard. you know? So
Right.
they can go party. They can do all of these other things. But if it is dependent upon you to bust ass to get scholarships to go to Stanford or Columbia or Georgetown, yeah, your experience in high school is going to be radically different. And I do feel like I wanted more of that from the film. I don't think we ever see Molly's parents. And so we're never able to get more than the sense that just, her coming out of that apartment gives us, right? But I'm like, yeah, that matters. And I also felt that a bit, like, I love how there is such a wealth of different characters in this school. So it's very multiracial. Like I said, we've got Molly, we've got other plus size characters. We've got queer characters all up in that thing, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, class seemed like a kind of curious lacuna, like where all it would have taken is Molly saying, like, you know what? I had to focus and I had to do this because if I want to go to Georgetown, I got to pay for it. My parents can't pay for this,
Right. Yes.
And I think, that leads me to one of the other things that I think the film walked it's a very tricky line between giving you a very specific experience and giving you, a narrative that is meant to nod to like the kind of universal, hey, this is what it's like being a teenager, right? Because that's not what being a teenager is like for everyone. But I think the film is such a warm invitation to embrace these very specific characters that I didn't feel pushed out. Although, my high school years looked, almost nothing like what we see here,
Sure.
But I think because there wasn't an insistence that like, oh yeah, this is the jock, or this is the slut, this is the class clown, whatever. There wasn't that insistence on it in the way that like 80s teen movies had.
Yeah.
I felt much more able to surrender to, as you say, like the kind of dream logic at play here, because, the film veers between, sort of very heartfelt, realistic, sincere moments, and then things that are absolutely just kind of like ludicrous, madcap,
Yeah, like there's a shared hallucination doll sequence, right? So I also I feel like I have to point out or acknowledge that so this film is directed by Olivia Wilde, and it's a very auspicious debut. I think that she, it is a film that makes really interesting choices cinematically. I mean, so there's the whole like latter half practically of the film is one big epic party sequence, the party, of sorts that Amy and Molly feel like they've been kind of missing out on their entire lives. They're like, this is our last night, our last chance. Let's go to a party. And there's just so much wonderful stuff done through, camera movements and music choices and so on and so forth, like shots that really kind of pull you into that whole party atmosphere, the environment that that reveal character and relationship dynamics and everything. And so it's like, wow, like Olivia Wilde is, based on like she's a true like a filmmaker in the sense that it's like she doesn't direct this film the way that say a kind of director for hire,
right,
whatever, just get the important plot information in the shot kind of generic, filmmaker approach. It's not that at all. Like it's a really wonderful directorial debut from her.
It really is. And I've been really struck by and gratified by the way that, so I've read, some articles and interviews with Olivia Wilde speaking about the process of making this movie. And one of the things that has struck me is the incredible generosity she demonstrates with the collaborations. So you definitely get the sense from her that she is well aware that there is no one person responsible for a film.
Yes.
And this is a myth that, we love to attach to male directors.
Yeah.
The myth of like the genius male director who shapes everything,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
The kind of like Stanley Kubrickian version of it. But the way that she talks about, the work she did with the music supervisor for the film or the colorists and the cinematographers, it is absolutely a film that she directed, like she was, sort of the executive voice behind, but it was a really collaborative project for her. And she is proud of that. She is absolutely, full of admiration for the people that she feels lucky to have worked with. And that absolutely shows. There are scenes in this film that I wanted to sink into my chair. I loved so much. I talked with you, Carol, just, briefly, jokingly about the sort of famous scene in the movie that a lot of people have talked about with Amy jumping into a swimming pool.
Yeah.
And she is having a moment, this thrilling final, culmination, getting together with this girl that she has had this tremendous crush on, Ryan. It jumps into a pool and swims through. And the way that she is shot in that scene and the way that the water enfolds her, the colors there, it is an absolutely beautiful, it's probably no more than a minute, but the way that scene looks and the music behind it, I haven't been as impressed by just a moment in a film in a really long time, probably since If Beale Street Could Talk by Barry Jenkins. I just thought like the way that everything came together in that moment was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like that scene in particular, there are those moments in our lives maybe where the emotions, the stakes, everything feels like magnified by 100 because, like as you say, like so this young girl, this Ryan, her classmate who she has a crush on, this is something that she's been building up in her mind and in her heart for months and months and months, and everything about the way it's shot, the way it sounds, the water, the glow of the water and the movement and everything, like it really expertly just communicates that pinnacle of emotion that
yes.
This is like building up to just something that I'm sure has played out in her mind, like just over and over and over again. And so the moment has that that air of like magic about it. And the way the film creates that is, that I think is part of what, is part of where this film does get most of the truth of the experiences of younger people. Because I think that for a lot of us, like those kinds of, those moments of particular like emotional, like heightened just intensity are maybe something that's more common, when we're younger, or at least the context and the whole attitude around them can be very different when we're younger than as we get older. And so I think that there was a way in which the film like really was tapping into something true there about again, obviously speaking in broad generalizations, but about like, the experiences of at least the specific characters that it was telling a story about.
Yeah, I don't know, and I would love to hear more about, as you say, the way that, actual young people, non-90-year-olds are responding or not responding to this film, excuse me, because there is such a wide gulf between media that is made for them and media that is made about them. And I don't think we tease out those differences often enough, right?
Right.
And so you'll have people talking about like young adult literature, for instance. So just to take a famous example, Harry Potter. People talking about the way that like the Harry Potter universe is set up, the characterizations, like there are real, criticisms that you can make about it. But the fact is those books were written for a particular audience. And so if it does not work for you, an adult, that does not mean that the book is not successful. Or the movie is not successful, right?
Yeah.
And so, this film, I felt like even though I was no longer in, I'm not 17 myself, and regardless of whether as a 17-year-old I felt or did these specific things,
sure.
Nevertheless, the film manages to convey the sort of bigness of your emotions when you're 17, when everything means something,
right.
and when you make such bad decisions sometimes, quick, snap, spontaneous decisions, because you have a 17-year-old's, experience and huge heart and, brain that is desperately, making connections, but you're not 35. And so you're not going to respond the way a 35-year-old would or a 45-year-old would. And so often the media that we see that seems to be aimed at teens has this sort of like smug sort of dismissal, of the way that teenagers actually, kind of live and inhabit their bodies and, feel their ways to becoming who they're going to be. And I never felt that in this movie. And part of it came through the soundtrack. Like, I just thought the soundtrack was so amazing. It absolutely reminded me of those moments when you're, 15 years old and you're in your room lying on your bed, lights off, listening to music.
Yeah.
There's nothing like the way that trips whatever switch it is in your brain, that you will never have those moments in the same way that you do when you're that age, just letting life wash over you.
And, I just feel like the film was so skillful in consistently finding a kind of truth such that, like, so you have that dreamlike kind of quality, or that heightened, I should say, maybe quality that around the scene in the swimming pool, because that's what the emotions of the moment feel like. The emotion, it would feel in real life like a moment happening in slow motion with a perfect song on the soundtrack, etc. But then, like, you also have later, a sexual encounter, basically like a sex scene, but it's nothing whatsoever like the kind of airbrush, like perfect, at all, right? It is kind of, it is goofy and awkward and everything, and it's like, and it actually feels really consistent to me that the film would go from, here's this moment of like magic and slow motion and dreams to this because if the sex scene were that kind of like idealized perfect thing, like then that would ring false, because it's like, well, no, I mean, like Amy, or the whole film, she's been kind of anxious and awkward, or like she's inexperienced, and she's like, well, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do?
Right.
And so the fact that the film like acknowledges that and treats it in what I think is a compassionate way, but it also is one that acknowledges like how maybe, borderline painful in some ways it is if things don't, when things go like wrong,
right? Yes,
because it just feels like you can feel like just such a fuck up, or like what I just thought I just loved that. I loved the way that the film handled that. The sex or the would-be sex encounter that happens at the party for Amy.
Yeah, I think so much, like, God, this is a whole other conversation, but we really just don't know. I say we, like media makers, just don't really know how to deal with teen sexuality, right? And it's often, going back to the pool scene, there was never a moment where I felt as if the camera was being anything but loving and respectful of Amy's body. She strips down to her underwear and, jumps in the water. But I just thought, you know what? if there was some like 40-year-old dude who had directed this, we absolutely would have gotten more like lingering shots, you know, like up the ass shots or whatever of Amy's body as she swam underneath this water. And, you know, the film would have been encouraging us to see her as a sex object instead of what Booksmart gives us, which is us sort of like, look at what it was like remember what it was like to feel young and free and so full of hope in a moment that time slows down and everything, you're on the precipice of that perfect, you know, culmination of everything you've wanted, right? But going back to what you were saying about like the sex scene when it finally happens, the film both treats sex as something that is, you know, amazing and great, but also something that can be ludicrous and awkward. You know, it doesn't elevate it beyond what it should be, and it is so unapologetically queer. Thank you.
Yes,
the queerness in this movie. This, you know, there are bi characters, there are, you know, lesbian characters, there are gay characters. And the film does not give us what most films do, which would be like a kind of, you know, half-hearted, you know, wink and nudge, like, oh, this character is gonna discover that she actually likes girls, and then there's a very chaste kiss at the end, and we're supposed to, you know, accept that as like, you know, queer representation as the film, you know, being queer friendly, and it's like, fuck that, this film is gay through and through, and I was so here for it. I also was like, man, kids today don't know they're born, you know, like in the year 2019, I bet you do have schools where, you know, like people are just out and proud and awesome, you know, and fuck you, you have to deal with what we did. And of course, that, like, again, that's not true for every young person. Not everybody grows up in a school, but you know, where they can just host like murder mystery parties, you know, that are super gay.
But it is so important to have films that, you know, whether it's the reality for, you know, whatever percentage of young people or not, like, it's so important to have films that show us what that looks like, right? Like, here is a class of high school students where, like, there's no derision or, like, divide around, like, oh, you know, these students being gay or what have you. Like, it's, like, that's what people a lot of times have a hard time even imagining, I think, what the kinds of representations, the transformative representations of a world without, say, you know, queerphobia, for instance, you know, looks like. Right. And it's like, well, here, I mean, radical representations don't always, like, I mean, they can, and sometimes they should, but they don't always, like, sort of get really up in your face about, like, being transgressive. They can also be sort of just quietly radical by presenting what is not yet accepted as normal in our culture as if it is accepted as normal.
Yeah, and so characters like, and I'm blanking on their names, but we always kind of see them together.
So
I
the
think
theater
it's
director, George
and
Alan.
Right, you know, so we always see them together. You know, they are leaders of like the drama club in school, like, and then they're like if super dramatic lives.
Yeah, if there was one character in this film who I was like, okay, that's you know, that is somebody who I sort of remember from like my high school. I mean, obviously he's a exaggerated version of it with like got 15 different theatrical productions going at once and whatever. But like, it's like, okay, yes, George that is definitely.
Oh yeah, like the drama kid. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like the film does not. the film has such love for all of the different characters, and like the reasons why George and Alan are ridiculous are not because they're gay, and they are absolutely gay, right? Like we're left no question under that.
There.
But it's because they are so over the top. Like they are, and not like, you know, they're too flamboyant or whatever. It's that, you know, the sort of like hyper dramatic drama kiddiness of it. Is what makes them kind of ridiculous, not the fact that, like, you know, Alan dresses in these gold lame dresses, or you know, George puts on these, you know, murder mystery parties with his parents hiding in the kitchen. I absolutely love that. I have to say, like, there are my favorite character in the movie was Gigi, just because she was so funny to me. And Gigi was played by
Billy Lord. Oh my God.
Carrie Fisher's daughter. I don't know that she was as seamless a part of the cast as she could have been.
Yeah.
You know, and yet I loved her.
I mean, the running gag of her showing up everywhere is like just amazing.
So good.
And like Billy, there's just something about Billy, like Billy Lord, because Gigi, I guess Gigi does feel a bit apart in some sense from the group dynamics. I mean, both part of and like she's sort of defined by being in some way like a satellite or like not quite fully integrated into things. And so I don't know. I just felt like Billy Lord. There was something about Billy Lord. She just like a perfect bit of casting and just a wonderful little performance.
Yeah, and like everyone in the cast, absolutely giving 110% commitment to the role.
Yes.
There was no one here phoning it in, even in the quieter roles. And I say quieter, but, you know, every character has just a little bit of, you know, like Boogle House stuff going on, from Jason Sudeikis' character as the principal / Uber driver to Will Forte as Amy's dad, you know, but absolutely everyone is committing to this, just like this pocket universe.
Yeah.
And giving it.
It's almost like, you know, you may initially come to have your own suspicions or expectations about different characters, like, you know, Nick. Oh, right, Nick is just the pretty boy, whatever kind of empty-headed jock type that Molly fancies, but like, you know, you like every single character, including him. You sort of learn that it's not as simple as you may initially think. Like they are they're richer. They all have a little more to them than what you may originally want to write them off as this or that, but it's never that cut and dry.
Yeah, and you know, again, in a typical teen movie, if Molly did not end up with Nick, which I think in a typical teen movie she would have, but if she did not, after, you know, what in another movie would have been his villainous turn. So he tells Molly, wait for me, I'm absolutely coming back to you.
Yeah.
And then he never does. And, you know, we find, Amy finds him kissing her love interest,
right.
Ryan.
Oh.
Which was, oh my God,
the collision there, the way that just, their dreams, their hopes for their own, you know, romantic aspirations just colliding.
At that point, I wanted them to set his house on fire and just ride off into the sunset, you know? But I think in another movie, Nick would have ended up with AAA, which, first of all, I love that the movie calls out this gross way in which this young girl has been demonized by her classmates for being sexually active, right? Yep. So, and she says, and you know what's fucked up about it? The girls call me that too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like calling out internalized misogyny. Yes. I was so fucking here for it. I was so here for it. But so going back, Nick, in another movie, Nick and AAA would have ended up together because they're sort of like, you know, power couple, standard teen style, right? Two very conventionally attractive, with a lot of like, you know, popular cultural capital in that school. They would have ended up together. But I loved that, okay, if Nick was not going to get with Molly, that he got with Ryan, who I don't know that the character is meant to be read as like non-binary, but in my fanfic version of the movie, they certainly were. And I was like, yeah, you know, like, you know, like the captain of the school getting with this gender non-conforming character, you know, like I loved that shit. I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Like even in the heartbreak and for both Molly and Amy, it's like, oh, but that's like an interesting pairing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it still is.
I couldn't hate him because I was like, well, Ryan is adorable. Oh my God, these kids, they killed me. They were so adorable.
Yeah. before we wrap this up, I just want to shout out my favorite like little throwaway laugh line in this film was there's a guy who's delivering pizzas to the party, and as he's carrying the pizzas that the students that the kids have ordered from the pizza shop to his car, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm probably getting a little bit wrong, but it's something like that because I think he's got 2 pizzas, and he's like, 2 half cheese, half sausage pizzas is just 1 cheese and 1 sausage pizza, idiots. I loved that line so much.
The whole scene with him was fantastic. When the girls, pop up in the backseat of his car, he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? I could be driving you off into the woods to kill you."
What a concern! He's like, trying to convey to them, like, "Hey, I could be a serial killer for all you know. Why, don't be so trusting of people."
It was so great. Yeah, that sort of butting up of real life concerns against standard teen movie kind of logic, whereby you just jump in somebody's car and you drive through someone's backyard like Ferris Bueller style or something, and you get to your destination. It was hilarious. Heartily recommend Booksmart, folks.
Yeah.
Please go check it out. Why don't we come back in a moment for our weekly freak out deals?
Let's do it.
Carol, you with me?
I am.
Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners. We would love for you to join our Patreon community over at www.patreon.com/femfreak. Do it today. All right, now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carol, why don't you go first? Tell me what your freak out is.
Sure. All right. Yeah. My freak out this week is a game. It's new on the Switch. It is called, it's got a real mouthful of a title, but it's called, I believe it's called Cadence of Hyrule: Crypt of the Necrodancer, featuring The Legend of Zelda. And you can just call it, so it's basically just called Cadence of Hyrule. And so a few years ago, there was a game that came out called Crypt of the Necrodancer, which is a rhythm-based sort of dungeon exploration game where you, as this hero named Cadence, have to navigate dungeons and fight monsters and everything. But you have to, the gimmick, and it's actually really effective and fun once you let yourself get into it, is that you can only move on the beat of the music. So you and the monsters all only move on the beat of the music. And and what Cadence of Hyrule has done is it's kind of taken this core Crypt of the Necrodancer concept, and it has basically built almost like a fully fledged old school Legend of Zelda game around it, or incorporating that. So visually, in terms of the graphics, Cadence of Hyrule harkens back to primarily to A Link to the Past, which is a lot of people would say the best, or their favorite Zelda game of all time. But and in Cadence of Hyrule, you can play as Link or as Zelda, which is a really wonderful option, or as Cadence, the female hero of Crypt of the Necrodancer. But yeah, you're exploring a Hyrule that will be familiar to anyone who, like me, has played those old school Zelda games. But as in Crypt of the Necrodancer, you can only move and attack on the beat of the music, and it just really requires you to think about your movement in a different way. It makes the whole process of playing the game one that involves the brain in a way that say that Zelda games typically don't, because you really have to focus on trying to maintain this rhythm. And so it's a very kind of simple concept, but I feel like the game ends up being a bit more than just the sum of its parts, because it treats the Zelda games that it is referencing with such kind of respect, but also doesn't like shirk on fully implementing the kind of rhythm-based mechanics of Crypt of the Necrodancer. So it's extreme. Like, I am really bad at this game, but it's quite tough. But thankfully, it does have a lot of options for adjusting the difficulty. You can turn off the rhythm aspect entirely if you're just not feeling it, or you want an easier experience. So don't let that maybe keep you from trying it if it's a game that looks interesting to you. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with Cadence of Hyrule.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I am freaking out. So ever since I watched Booksmart, I've been trying to recreate again those moments of Ebony DJing for herself in her basement bedroom, lights off. Because I loved the soundtrack to Booksmart and have listened to it over and over again since I saw the music or saw the movie. I think it is practically perfect in every way. But so I have been listening to a lot of Donny Hathaway this week. Okay. And so my freak out this week is Donny Hathaway. He might be my favorite musician of all time. Donny Hathaway, if you don't know, 70s soul, jazz, gospel, R&B singer, multi-instrumentalist. If you do know his songs, it's probably for things like This Christmas, which gets played, every Christmas season, or I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know, A Song for You. So listening to Donny Hathaway, an artist whose music, whose voice, it completely bypasses the part of my brain that is articulating what's happening. It is just something that I have to experience. And so I want to encourage people to go check out 3 Donny Hathaway songs in particular. So not the ones that he's perhaps most known for, but actually 3 of his covers. And Donny Hathaway is one of those people, like Aretha Franklin. If Aretha Franklin takes over your song, that's her song now. If Donny Hathaway took over your song, that's his song now, right?
Okay, right.
So the song Misty, which people may know as a Johnny Mathis tune, Jealous Guy, which many people probably know as a John Lennon song, and then He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. So just do it for old Ebs, all right? I just want you to get into that, but I want you specifically, whether it's Donny Hathaway or someone else, I want you to remember what it was like to be flat on your back on the floor of your bedroom, or on your bed, lights off, just letting the music wash over you. And that realization, the kind of moment you have where you're like, no one has ever heard this song the way I am hearing it right now. This song, you want to put it in people's faces and allow it to communicate for you, So that's my freak out for the week. Music, Donny Hathaway, and then in particular, Misty, Jealous Guy, and He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. You want to submit your freakouts? Of course you do. You can submit those to us at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Anita will be back next week to tell us everything we did wrong and everything we did right. We're going to get graded. Stay tuned for the freaking after party, only available to backers of this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. This show is engineered by Rob Pera. Sarah Norales provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social media at FemFreak. Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Later.